If you want to reconnect with an avoidant after no contact, the first thing you need to do is understand their mindset. You need to stop seeing their distance as rejection and start recognizing it for what it really is, a defense mechanism. Avoidants don't pull away because they don't care. They don't create space because they want to hurt you. They do it because for them, emotional closeness can feel overwhelming, even threatening. And if you don't understand that, if you take it personally, you're going to react in ways that push them even further away. Most people make the mistake of thinking that avoidants just need to be convinced. That if they can say the right words, show the right emotions, prove how much they care, the avoidant will suddenly let down their walls. But that's not how it works. In fact, the more you try to pull them closer, the more they're going to retreat. That's why reconnecting has to start with understanding. You have to see the world through their eyes. Avoidants grew up learning that closeness isn't always safe. Maybe they had caregivers who were inconsistent, who didn't respect their emotions, who made them feel like needing love was a weakness. So they adapted. They learned to rely on themselves. They learned that distance feels safer than connection. And now, as adults, every time they feel like someone is getting too close, their first instinct is to shut down. It's not because they don't want love, it's because love to them has always come with strings attached. So if you come back into their life with expectations, if you show up looking for immediate reassurance, if you push for emotional conversations right away, their walls are going to go up even higher. But when you understand that their distance isn't about you, when you recognize that their silence isn't a punishment, but a form of self-protection, you stop reacting emotionally. You stop trying to force closeness. You realize that the best way to reconnect isn't to chase, it's to create a space where they feel safe enough to come toward you. That's the key. Safety. An avoidant doesn't open up because they're pressured. They open up when they feel like they can trust that you're not going to demand more from them than they're ready to give. When they feel like they won't be suffocated. When they know that being in your presence doesn't mean losing their independence. And that takes patience. It takes self-control. It takes you being emotionally secure enough to not need constant reassurance from them in order to feel okay. Hey, think about it. If someone is afraid of drowning, the worst thing you can do is pull them into deep water. But if you stand on solid ground, if you show them that they can wade in at their own pace, eventually they'll start to move toward you. Not because they're forced to, but because they feel safe enough to. That's what reconnecting with an avoidant looks like. It's not about convincing them to be close, it's about creating an environment where closeness feels like a choice instead of a trap. And here's the part most people don't want to hear: this only works if you're emotionally strong enough to handle it. Because if you're reconnecting with an avoidant just to fill a void, just because you feel lonely, just because you need them to validate you, they're going to sense it. And it's going to push them away even faster. But if you come back into their life as someone who is stable, who is secure, who doesn't need them to be different in order to feel okay, then you become the one person they don't have to run from. So before you even reach out, before you even think about trying to reconnect, ask yourself, am I coming from a place of strength or a place of need? Because if you're looking for them to complete you, to heal something inside you, to give you the love you feel like you're missing, it's not going to work. But if you're coming from a place of understanding, if you truly see them for who they are instead of who you want them to be, if you can meet them where they're at instead of trying to pull them to where you are, then you have a real chance at rebuilding something. Because at the end of the day, an avoidant isn't impossible to connect with. They're not incapable of love. They just need to feel like loving you doesn't mean losing themselves. And when you give them that, when you make it safe for them to come closer, that's when real connection happens. Not through force, not through pressure, but through patience, understanding, and a willingness to let them move at their own pace. One of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to reconnect with an avoidant is rushing back in too fast. They assume that because enough time has passed, they can just pick up where they left off. But that's not how it works. If you come back with too much intensity, if you push for answers, if you demand closeness before they're ready, you'll trigger the very thing that caused them to pull away in the first place. And instead of rebuilding the connection, you'll end up right back where you started, shut out, frustrated, and wondering what went wrong. The key is to respect their need for space. That doesn't mean disappearing forever. It doesn't mean waiting endlessly, hoping they'll make the first move. It means understanding that avoidants don't respond to pressure. The more they feel like they're being pulled into something before they're ready, the more they resist. So if you want to reconnect, you have to approach it with patience. You have to show them through your actions that you're not here to overwhelm them or take away their independence. Think about it like this. If someone flinches every time they get too close to a flame, you don't get them to stop flinching by shoving fire in their face. You give them time. You let them realize at their own pace that there's no threat. That's what you need to do with an avoidant. You have to create an environment where they feel like they can come closer, not because they're being forced to, but because they actually want to. And that starts with re-entering their life in a way that feels natural, not intrusive. No grand gestures. No deep, emotional conversations right out of the gate. Just a simple, light touch point. Maybe it's a short message, something casual, something that doesn't demand a response. Maybe it's engaging with something they post in a way that feels easy and pressure-free. What matters is that you show them that reconnecting with you isn't going to come with expectations they're not ready for. The moment they sense that talking to you means stepping into an emotional conversation before they're prepared for it, they'll shut down. And that's not because they don't care. It's because they process emotions differently. Unlike people who lean into connection when they're struggling, avoidants do the opposite. They retreat. They pull back to regain control. And if they feel like that control is being threatened, they'll do what they've always done, create more distance. That's why timing matters. You have to meet them where they are, not where you want them to be. If they're not ready to talk, don't push. If they give you short responses, don't take it personally. If they're slow to engage, don't mistake that for disinterest. Because the truth is, they do want connection. They just want it in a way that doesn't make them feel like they're losing themselves. So instead of focusing on how fast you can get back to where you were, focus on creating an opening. A space where they can ease back into the connection without feeling trapped. And that requires self-control on your part. It requires you to manage your own emotions, to resist the urge to ask where they've been, why they pulled away, what they want now. Those conversations can come later once the foundation is rebuilt. But in the beginning, your only job is to make it easy for them to step back in. And that's not always easy because let's be honest, when you miss someone, you care about them, you want clarity, you want to know where you stand. But with an avoidant, pressing for answers too soon will only push them further away. You have to be willing to let the reconnection unfold on their terms, not yours. And that takes patience. It takes emotional strength. It takes trusting that if you create the right conditions, they will come closer in their own time. The people who fail at reconnecting are the ones who let their own anxiety take over. They come in too strong, they push too fast, they expect too much too soon. And when the avoidant pulls away again, they mistake it for rejection instead of recognizing it for what it really is, a need for space. But the people who succeed are the ones who understand that timing and space aren't obstacles. They're the very things that make reconnection possible. So take your time. Let things unfold naturally. You show them that being in your presence doesn't mean losing their freedom. And when you do that, when you create an environment where they feel safe to reconnect at their own pace, that's when you'll start to see real progress. That's when the door that once felt shut begins to open again. One of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to reconnect with an avoidant is rushing back in too fast. They assume that because enough time has passed, they can just pick up where they left off. But that's not how it works. If you come back with too much intensity, if you push for answers, if you demand closeness before they're ready, you'll trigger the very thing that caused them to pull away in the first place. And instead of rebuilding the connection, you'll end up right back where you started, shut out, frustrated, and wondering what went wrong. The key is to respect their need for space. That doesn't mean disappearing forever. It doesn't mean waiting endlessly hoping they'll make the first move. It means understanding that avoidants don't respond to pressure. The more they feel like they're being pulled into something before they're ready, the more they resist. So if you want to reconnect, you have to approach it with patience. You have to show them through your actions that you're not here to overwhelm them or take away their independence. But think about it like this. If someone flinches every time they get too close to a flame, you don't get them to stop flinching by shoving fire in their face. You give them time. You let them realize at their own pace that there's no threat. That's what you need to do with an avoidant. You have to create an environment where they feel like they can come closer, not because they're being forced to, but because they actually want to. And that starts with re-entering their life in a way that feels natural, not intrusive. No grand gestures, no deep emotional conversations right out of the gate, just a simple light touch point. Maybe it's a short message, something casual, something that doesn't demand a response. Maybe it's engaging with something they post in a way that feels easy and pressure-free. What matters is that you show them that reconnecting with you isn't going to come with expectations they're not ready for. The moment they sense that talking to you means stepping into an emotional conversation before they're prepared for it, they'll shut down. And that's not because they don't care. It's because they process emotions differently. Unlike people who lean into connection when they're struggling, avoidants do the opposite. They retreat. They pull back to regain control. And if they feel like that control is being threatened, they'll do what they've always done, create more distance. That's why timing matters. You have to meet them where they are, not where you want them to be. If they're not ready to talk, don't push. If they give you short responses, don't take it personally. If they're slow to engage, don't mistake that for disinterest, because the truth is they do want connection. They just want it in a way that doesn't make them feel like they're losing themselves. So instead of focusing on how fast you can get back to where you were, focus on creating an opening, a space where they can ease back into the connection without feeling trapped. And that requires self-control on your part. It requires you to manage your own emotions, to resist the urge to ask where they've been, why they pulled away, what they want now. Those conversations can come later once the foundation is rebuilt. But in the beginning, your only job is to make it easy for them to step back in. And that's not always easy. Because let's be honest, when you miss someone, when you care about them, you want clarity. You want to know where you stand, but with an avoidant, pressing for answers too soon will only push them further away. You have to be willing to let the reconnection unfold on their terms, not yours. And that takes patience. It takes emotional strength. It takes trusting that if you create the right conditions, they will come closer in their own time. The people who fail at reconnecting are the ones who let their own anxiety take over. They come in too strong, they push too fast, they expect too much too soon. And when the avoidant pulls away again, they mistake it for rejection instead of recognizing it for what it really is, a need for space. But the people who succeed are the ones who understand that timing and space aren't obstacles. They're the very things that make reconnection possible. So take your time. Let things unfold naturally. Show them that being in your presence doesn't mean losing their freedom. And when you do that, when you create an environment where they feel safe to reconnect at their own pace, that's when you'll start to see real progress. That's when the door that once felt shut begins to open again. Reconnecting with an avoidant isn't about what you say, it's about how you say it. It's about creating an environment where they feel safe enough to re-engage without feeling pressured, overwhelmed, or trapped. And that all starts with non-threatening communication. If you come in too strong, if you lead with heavy emotions, if you push for deep conversations right away, you're going to trigger their defense mechanism. They'll shut down, pull back, and you'll be left wondering why they're not responding the way you hope. The mistake most people make is assuming that more words will fix things. That if they can just explain their feelings, if they can just make the avoidant understand how much they care, everything will go back to the way it was. But that's not how avoidants work. Emotional pressure doesn't draw them closer, it pushes them away. The more they feel like they're being backed into a corner, the faster they'll run. That's why when you reach out, the last thing you want to do is make them feel like they owe you something. No guilt, no expectations, no pressure to respond in a certain way. Just an easy, natural way back in the conversation. And that starts with keeping things light. You don't have to overthink it. A simple message, something neutral, something casual, something that doesn't feel like an emotional demand. Maybe it's something funny, maybe it's a shared memory, maybe it's a question that doesn't require deep emotional investment to answer. The key is to make it feel safe, to make them feel like they can engage without it turning into something heavy. Because here's what you have to understand: avoidants aren't emotionless. They have feelings. They care. But emotions feel different for them than they do for you. Where some people find comfort in deep conversations, in expressing their emotions openly, avoidants often find it draining. It's not that they don't feel, it's that feeling too much, too fast can feel overwhelming. So if your first message back after no contact is loaded with emotion, if you come in with, "We need to talk," or "I've been thinking a lot about us," or "I need to know where we stand," you're already making it hard for them to stay open. That's why you ease in. That's why you make the first few interactions feel effortless. And once they see that talking to you doesn't mean stepping into an emotional minefield, once they see that they can engage with you without feeling suffocated, that's when they'll start to relax. That's when their walls start to lower, but you have to give it time. You have to show them through consistent and pressure-free communication that reconnecting doesn't mean losing themselves. And that requires you to manage your own emotions. Because let's be real, when you've been in no contact, when you've been waiting for this moment, there's a part of you that wants answers. You want to know how they feel. You want to know if they've missed you. You want to know if this is going somewhere. But asking those questions too soon will sabotage everything. You have to be willing to put your need for reassurance aside and focus on making them feel safe first. Because when an avoidant feels safe, that's when they start to open up. That's when they start to reconnect in a way that's real, not forced. But if they sense even the slightest hint of emotional pressure, if they feel like responding to you means stepping into an uncomfortable conversation, they'll pull back again. And you don't want that. You want to create a space where they come toward you because they want to, not because they feel obligated to. That's why you stay calm. You keep things neutral. You don't overreact to short responses. You don't read too much into every little thing. You just stay consistent. And if they don't engage right away, you don't panic. You don't push harder. You step back, give it space, and trust that if you create the right environment, they'll come around when they're ready. The people who fail at reconnecting are the ones who let their emotions take over. They get impatient. They get frustrated. They start sending long messages, pushing for conversations. The avoidant isn't ready for demanding clarity before the connection is strong enough to support it. And when the avoidant pulls away again, they take it as a rejection instead of recognizing it for what it is, a sign that they need more time to feel safe. But the people who succeed, they understand the power of patience. They understand that the goal isn't to force connection, it's to create a space where connection can happen naturally. They stay calm. They keep the conversation light. They let the avoidant set the pace. And because of that, they're the ones who get to see real progress. They're the ones who get to rebuild something real. So when you reach out, remember this isn't about getting instant reassurance. It's about planting a seed. It's about showing them through your actions that they can engage with you without fear, without pressure, without losing themselves. And when you do that, when you master the art of non-threatening communication, that's when the door starts to open again. That's when real reconnection begins. Most people think reconnecting with someone is about saying the right thing, making the right move, or finding some perfect moment to break the silence. But when you're dealing with an avoidant, it's not about what you say, it's about what you do over time. They don't respond to big emotional gestures. They don't trust sudden changes. What makes the difference isn't intensity, it's consistency. If you come in too strong, trying to prove something, they'll back away. But if you show up steadily, calmly, without pressure, that's when you create the space for real reconnection. Avoidants have learned to protect themselves by keeping a distance. They're not quick to trust emotional intimacy because to them, closeness has always come with expectations, with demands, with the risk of being overwhelmed. And the moment they feel like they're losing control, they shut down. That's why you can't come back into the life like a storm. You can't be a wave that crashes in one moment and disappears the next. That only reinforces what they already believe, that people push, people pull, and that opening up always comes with a price. What they need to see is something different. They need to see that you're steady, that you're not here to invade their space, but you're also not going to vanish the second they hesitate. That they can engage at their own pace without feeling like they have to match your level of intensity. Because if you show up with pressure, if you're looking for fast results, they will retreat. But if you are consistent, not overwhelming, not distant, just present, that's when they start to let their guard down. And here's the challenge. Consistency isn't always easy, especially when you don't get immediate feedback. Most people don't have the patience for it. They think if they send a message and the avoidant doesn't respond the way they hoped, then it's over. Or if they engage one day and pull back the next, then nothing is working. But that's not how an avoidant operates. They don't move in a straight line. They come closer in small, cautious steps. And if you misread those moments, if you react emotionally every time they hesitate, you break the progress you've been making. That's why you have to regulate yourself first. You have to be emotionally stable enough to handle the ups and downs without letting it shake you. Because if they sense that you're looking for validation, that you're waiting on their response to feel secure, they'll pull away again. Not because they don't care, but because the weight of your expectation feels like too much. But if you can stay centered, if you can keep showing up without needing instant results, you start to create a new experience for them. One where connection doesn't have to mean pressure. One where they don't feel like they're responsible for managing your emotions. And that's when something powerful happens. They start to trust that engaging with you isn't going to cost them their sense of self. That being close to you doesn't mean losing their freedom. And as that trust builds, their instinct to retreat starts to soften. Not because you push them into it, but because they see on their own that connection with you feels different than what they're used to. But this only works if you can handle the slow pace, if you can accept that some days they'll respond and some days they won't, that they might open up one moment and go quiet the next. If you take every shift as a setback, if you get frustrated and start pushing for more, you'll undo everything you've built. But if you can trust the process, if you can stay grounded, if you can be steady even when they're uncertain, that's when you start to see the real change. It's not about trying to fix them. It's not about trying to make them more expressive or more open on your timeline. It's about showing them through your actions that they don't have to run, that they don't have to protect themselves from you. And that takes patience. It takes emotional control. It takes the ability to give them space without disappearing, to stay present without smothering, to show up without expecting instant results. Most people won't do this. They'll either push too hard and scare the avoidant away, or they'll get discouraged and leave before the real progress begins. But the people who succeed are the ones who understand that reconnecting with an avoidant isn't about speed, it's about stability. And when you master that, when you become the one person in their life who feels safe, who feels steady, who doesn't demand more than they're ready to give, that's when they start to let you in. That's when real connection begins. One of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to reconnect with an avoidant is assuming that once they start responding, once they show some interest again, everything should just fall into place. That the connection should naturally progress, that things should move forward at a steady pace. But that's not how it works. Avoidants don't move in a straight line. They don't respond to connection the way most people do. They move in and out. One moment they seem engaged, open, interested. And the next they're distant again, like they're retreating back into their shell. And if you don't understand this pattern, if you take it personally every time they pull away, you'll sabotage everything before it has a chance to grow. The key is allowing space without letting insecurity take over. Because here's the reality: avoidants need space. Not just once, not just in the beginning, but throughout the entire process of reconnecting. It's how they regulate themselves. It's how they maintain a sense of control. And if you interpret every bit of distance as rejection, if you start chasing them every time they take a step back, they will feel that pressure. And the more they feel it, the more they'll pull away. Not because they don't care, but because connection starts to feel like something they have to escape from instead of something they can move toward. So instead of seeing their pullbacks as a problem, start seeing them as part of the process. Expect them, plan for them. Understand that they will come and go, and that has nothing to do with whether or not they care. The worst thing you can do is panic when they need space, because if you do, you'll react in ways that push them away even further. Maybe you start questioning them. Maybe you start sending multiple messages looking for reassurance. Maybe you start assuming the worst, that they don't want to reconnect, that they've lost interest, that you've done something wrong. And all of that energy, they can feel it. And when they feel it, it makes them want even more space. What you have to do is the opposite of what your instincts tell you. When they pull away, don't react emotionally. Stay steady. Let them have the space they need without making a big deal about it. Because when you do that, when they see that they can take space without losing you, without it turning into a dramatic event, that's when they start to feel safe. That's when they realize that they don't have to keep running. But that takes discipline on your part. That takes emotional maturity, because let's be honest, when someone pulls away, it's uncomfortable. It triggers that part of you that wants to reach out, that wants reassurance, that wants to know where you stand. But if you let that insecurity drive your actions, you will break the very thing you're trying to build. Because what they need isn't someone who panics every time they step back. What they need is someone who can hold steady, someone who understands their rhythm and doesn't try to force them into a different one. So instead of fearing the space, embrace it. Use it. Focus on yourself in those moments. Build your own sense of security so that your emotions aren't dependent on how much attention they're giving you at any given time. Because the more secure you are, the safer we feel with you. The more you trust the process, the more they start to trust you. And that's what makes the difference. The people who fail at reconnecting with an avoidant are the ones who let their own fear take over. They chase, they push, they pressure. And they don't realize that all of that energy is the exact reason the avoidant keeps pulling away. But the people who succeed, they master the art of balance. They give space without disappearing. They stay present without smothering. They allow the connection to breathe instead of trying to control it. And because of that, they create something that lasts. This isn't about trying to fix them. It's not about trying to make them more open or more affectionate or more expressive on your timeline. It's about understanding who they are, how they operate, and working with that instead of against it. It's about being strong enough to hold your own emotions so that their natural need for space doesn't make you feel insecure. Because when they feel like they can come and go without losing the connection, that's when they start to lean in. That's when they start to trust. That's when they stop running. So don't fear the space. Don't let it shake you. Use it as an opportunity to become even stronger in yourself. Because the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop reacting, the moment you create a connection that feels safe instead of suffocating, that's the moment they stop pulling away. That's the moment they start coming closer on their own. Reconnecting with an avoidant isn't just about getting back into the life. It's about maintaining that connection without falling into the same patterns that pushed them away in the first place. And this is where most people struggle. They focus so much on breaking the silence, on finding the right words, on creating that first moment of reconnection that they forget the real challenge comes after. Because an avoidant isn't looking for just any connection. They're looking for a connection that feels different from what they've known before, one that doesn't suffocate them, one that doesn't make them feel trapped, one that doesn't come with an unspoken demand for them to change who they are. The moment they sense that being close to you means giving up their autonomy, they'll retreat again. Not because they don't care, but because their instinct for self-preservation is stronger than their desire for intimacy. And if you don't understand that, if you mistake every moment of distance for rejection, you'll find yourself stuck in an exhausting cycle of trying to pull them closer while they're trying to create space. The only way to break that pattern is to build a connection that makes them feel safe enough to stay. That starts with trust, not just the trust they have in you, but the trust you have in the connection itself. If you're constantly looking for signs of reassurance, if you're measuring the success of the relationship based on how much attention they're giving you in any given moment, you're sending a message that connection with you comes with emotional pressure. And the more pressure they feel, the more they'll withdraw. But if you show up with a sense of calm, with a belief that the connection doesn't have to be forced, that it doesn't have to be rushed, they start to experience something different. They start to see that being close to you doesn't mean losing themselves, that they can engage with you without feeling like they have to give up their space, their independence, their way of moving through the world. And that's when they stop running. Not because you convince them, not because you push them, but because they see through your actions that connection with you feels different than what they've known before. This is why emotional control is everything. The more secure you are within yourself, the more stable the connection becomes. And stability is what they need most. Because the truth is, avoidants don't avoid connection, they avoid the pain they associate with connection. The expectations, the pressure, the fear of not being enough or of losing themselves. But when you remove that pressure, when you create a space where they can show up as they are without fear of being pulled in deeper than they're ready for, that's when they lean in naturally. But this takes patience. This takes consistency. It takes the ability to let them come toward you on their own, instead of always reaching for them first. It takes understanding that love isn't about possession, that closeness isn't about intensity, that a strong connection isn't built in a moment of passion, but in a series of steady, pressure-free interactions over time. Most people don't have the discipline for this. They get impatient. They want certainty. They want answers. And when they don't get it fast enough, they start trying to force clarity. But the moment you demand clarity from an avoidant before they're ready to give it, you send them right back into their shell. The moment you make the connection about what you need instead of creating a space where they feel safe, you break the very thing you were trying to build. The people who succeed in reconnecting with an avoidant are the ones who master the art of being present without being overwhelming. They're the ones who understand that love isn't about control, that connection isn't about urgency, that trust isn't built through words, but through consistent pressure-free experiences. And because they understand this, they become the one person the avoidant doesn't feel the need to run from. They create a connection that feels like freedom instead of a cage. So if you want to not only reconnect but maintain that connection, you have to become that person. You have to be steady enough to hold your own emotions without needing them to constantly reassure you. You have to be confident enough to trust that if the connection is meant to grow, it will without forcing it, without chasing, without needing to control the pace. And when you do that, when you build a connection based on safety, on trust, on mutual respect for space and closeness, that's when you stop the cycle. That's when they stop running. That's when they stay, not because you convince them, not because you push them, but because for the first time, connection doesn't feel like a threat. It feels like home.